All right. Well, good evening and welcome.
Good evening.
We, on behalf of the Hispanic Center, we want to thank everyone for being on the call with us. Again, tonight's call is racial injustice. You know, where do we go from here? And we want to, thank and welcome those that are going to be following us on our Centro Hispano Facebook page and on BC TV. Again, we appreciate our partners in the community and our ability to be able to take this message out to those that, that want to be a part of our solution moving forward. So again, I want to thank everyone for being on. At this time, if we could, I would like to have everyone, just if you could please give you a brief introduction again of who you are and what organization you represent, so that those that are watching know who you are. So Marquise, could you start us off?
Yeah, no problem. Hey y'all, this is Marquise. I am the creator and the 1/4 of the Dear Reading podcast. I also host another podcast called This American Negro, which aims to bridge academia and the hood. I'm also a Black male educator in the Philadelphia area, but I was born and raised in the city of Philadelphia. My primary focus is to bring hip hop culture into the education space. And that's just a little bit about me. So thanks for having me on this dialogue today. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Marquise. Crystal.
Hi, I'm Crystal Gilmore Harris, and I work for the Reading School District during the day and in the evening as the cheerleading coach. I am also the program director for the Lonnie Walker Foundation, and I guess I would kind of consider myself a community activist for the city of Reading. I'm very active in trying to make sure that we all figure out how to work together, because the sooner we get united, the more control we will have of our own city.
Thank you, Crystal. Pastor Alec.
Yes, sir. I am Dr. Bruce Alec. I am pastor, the Zion Baptist Church in Reading. I also serve as the president of the Pennsylvania Baptist State Convention, which is an organization of 200 plus churches from Philadelphia to Pittsburgh to Erie and Harrisburg and all parts in between. I am grateful to be a part of this. Born and raised in Philadelphia. I've been in Reading for now. This is my 4th year, and I live here, and I'm happy. I love it. I consider Reading a hidden gem in the state of Pennsylvania. So I am delighted to be here and to be a part of this dialogue.
Well, thank you. We're glad to have you. Deputy Chief Ruiz, could you introduce the team that's with you?
Sure. I'm Deputy Chief Javier Ruiz from the Reading Police Department. And to my right, I have Officer Mark Hackney. And to my left, I have Lieutenant Luz Shade.
Hello, everybody.
Okay.
Thank you so much for being a part of the call. Congresswoman in the future, right? Councilwoman.
I don't know. What are you projecting?
He's prophesying.
That's right.
So hi, everyone. My name is Johanny Cepeda Freitas. I am your councilwoman for District 6 in the city of Reading. I'm also the owner of Mi Casa Su Casa Cafe. We've been in operation since 2007. I'm a community activist as well. I love to get involved and see where I can help to uplift our people, empower, and just keep improving as a city overall. Thank you for having me, Michael.
Excellent. Thanks for being here. Am I missing anyone? Has the chief joined us? I see other people on the call.
Not so far. Let me see.
Okay, now I see there's 2 phones. Maybe that's...
Mike, remember one of the phone numbers is ours because we had to dial in as well.
Okay, very well. So I just want to make sure I didn't miss anyone. So everyone has introduced themselves?
You should be joining us too.
Okay.
Probably the other phone number is me. It's Chief Thornelli from Reading. I'm dialed in. I'm in the midst of dealing with a few different things right now.
No, excellent. Thank you. Just want to make sure that
I'm here.
we acknowledge that you're here with us, Chief. So thank you. So, let's, before we jump into it, again, just to share, again, what our mission is for this call. is for each one must reach one to teach one. And, that's what we're trying to do here with tonight's call, with everything that's been happening in our country, the racial and social injustice that we have been witnessing. We thought, what role can we play? What role can the Hispanic Center play to bring diverse voices together to tackle these tough issues that for some people are afraid to have conversations on? And so that's what tonight is. We're not going to solve the world's whims tonight. We're hoping that this is just a jumping off point that will lead to other future conversations around the issues of racial injustice and where we go from here. It's time. The time is now to have those conversations. And I believe in our community in Greater Reading, we have the individuals in place that, can have that conversation and help move us forward. So again, today is just the beginning. It's a starting point. As I shared with the rest of our panel earlier, I have none of the answers, and I'm hoping to learn tonight like everyone else. So again, we want to thank everyone who is joining us. We have over 56 people following us on Facebook. We ask those individuals on Facebook, start watch parties, get more people, bring more people into the fold. If you have questions, please ask questions. Send them through the Facebook page. If you're watching us on BCTV, again, thank you for joining us on BCTV. Again, we all have a role to play, and that's what tonight is all about. So we're going to go jump right into it. And one of the first topics that I wanted to discuss with our panel is the idea, the concept of systematic racism. Systematic racism, what is it? What is it? Why do people claim not to see it? And how does it manifest itself today in our community? Does anybody want to lead the discussions around what systematic racism is?
I'll go.
Marquise? Sure.
Yeah. So when we're discussing racism, we have to understand that ism implies that it's a system. That's what that is. So it's a system that's based on discriminating upon the race of somebody primarily, which means the color of their skin. So when we do talk about this, we talk about it being a structure that's put in place. So we see this in education, we see this in police departments, we see this in how communities are all set up. And so when we're having this conversation on structural racism, we have to understand that these are multiple things that are working at once. And if you need to understand, structural racism at its purest form looks like essentially slavery is what that would be. So it's the exploitation of a lot of people in these spaces. And that's what the most purest form of structural racism looks like. And so we see this in economic, social, political, and community disenfranchisement across here. So at the end of the day, it's a bunch of systems that work to keep Black, brown, poor people and other marginalized groups at the bottom because there has to be somebody on top. So that's essentially what all of that is in the most basic of terms that I can put it.
No, I appreciate that. Well done. Crystal?
Actually, pretty good for basic.
Pretty well, because that's exactly what it is. And when you're at the top, you can't see it because you're at the top. So why would you need to see it?
Right.
That's part of the problem sometimes. When you already have your foot in the door and you're already on all the playing fields, you can't see the people that are standing outside the fence because you're already in the mix. If that helps make it plain for more people. It's easy to say, well, the jobs are out there. Are they applying? Well, you can apply, but if you don't get an interview, you don't get the opportunity to get those jobs.
Mm-hmm.
You hear people saying that, well, people don't take advantage of everything that they have out there. I can tell you that there are a lot of things that are out there, but we aren't aware as Black people that they're out there in order to take advantage of them. So there's a lack of communication between what is offered and what is not offered. Like I said, Marquise said it well, but that's just to add some more things to it. Again, if you're on the playing field, you don't always see the people outside the fence. And I think that happens a lot. When you're already at the top, why are you worried about who's on the bottom?
Yeah, I think that the term we used to use was institutional racism. Yes. That is actually built into the institutions that preside over civil society, or what we call civil society. It's invisible if you're the beneficiary. But if you're not the beneficiary of that system, it's quite visible. A little differently put, perhaps, was one of the things we used to say is, at least in the South, you knew what was coming at you. In the southern part of the United States, they didn't like you, they let you know it. I pastored a church in rural Georgia. I knew who didn't like me in terms of the white community, and they would talk about getting rid of that ALEC crowd and that kind of thing. But then when you come north, it's hidden. It's here, but it's hidden. And so it's almost, I'm a fan of this new show that just came out, Snowpiercer. Telling on myself, I love science fiction. But one of the things the guy was asked, he said, what do you see? The guy who lived in the back part of the train that they call the tailies. They said, what do you see there? He said, as you look at this train, and he said, I see a fortress to classism. In other words, the way the train was constructed, it's 1,001 cars. You had all along there, first class, second class, and then I guess low class or whatever they call them, the tailies, who were in the tail end. Society is built like that. And that's why we call it systemic or institutional. It's built into the fabric so that it seems normal and normative. One of my favorite quotes goes, the greatest weapon in the mind of the oppressed, of the oppressor, is the mind of the oppressed.
That part, say that again, because it's the biggest trick of white supremacy.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a movie lover, y'all, so I'll quote movies as much as I do scripture.
It's all good.
But one of my favorite movies is Cry Freedom. Denzel Washington played the part of Stephen Biko, South African activist, who was the father of the Black consciousness movement there and was leading revolutionary change in a peaceful way while Mandela was still in prison. And he said, when we sit at the table with the white counterparts or the white South Africans to talk about freedom, we don't come as beggars. We want to sit at the table as equals, that we all have something to share. And I think that's where you get this idea. Systemic racism, it's there. People don't see it because if they're the beneficiaries, they don't want to see it. They like the status quo. But for those who are on the underside of that, they see it every day of their lives. Mm-hmm. I've seen it every day of my life. Mm-hmm. That's just my take.
Mm-hmm. No, thank you. I mean, I think that's important, as a where to start, in terms of what is systematic racism and how does it show itself here in our community. And again, you gave different type of examples as it relates to whether it's the zip code that you happen to be born into, whether, it's the job that you're applying for, that you may be qualified for, but never receive the interview for. Or whether it's, again, you see it, in other forms, whether it's police or others, it's there. It's something that's been there for a long time. So the question becomes, what do we do? How do we take steps as a community to confront the systematic racism that exists in our community? What steps can we take around that? So my hope is that we'll have conversations around that tonight. Again, so thank you for that. Anyone want to add anything around systematic racism before we touch on the next topic that I have for us today?
I would also add that systemic institutionalized racism comes in various forms. So the one that we're experiencing at its peak today is anti-Black racism is what we're currently expressly facing today. So I want us to be very clear, like when we're having this conversation, the frustration that we are seeing is due to 400 plus years of oppression of systems that are in place. And this is a buildup of generational trauma, and this is what it manifests into. And so when we are having this conversation, I understand the idea of peace, I understand the idea of unity, but peace has been Black people holding this anger in for the last 400 years and only starting to react in very certain pockets. So I just want us to be very clear, like, I understand where a lot of people try to come from in this conversation, but I want to make sure there's an accountability that comes when we discuss systemic racism, because if we're not acknowledging the very violent institution at play, the very people that participate in this violent institution, then this conversation is going to not go anywhere in terms of progress, right? And so when we are having this conversation, understand the participation of the police departments, understand the participation of our education space in these institutions, because that's really where it starts, is that core. That's how we also see this manifest in different ways. And I also want to make sure we talk about the opportunities that are placed within our community as well. So we can see that the stark difference in the protest that was on Sunday versus the one that was yesterday, if we want to have a conversation on how this manifests in terms of anti-Black racism. And when we talk about anti-Blackness, that is all encompassing. So Black is an umbrella term, because that's sometimes we default it to just man and woman, but Black people also include continental Africans, include undocumented people, include queer people, include women, include a lot of these different folks that are in here. So when we are having this conversation, I want us to make sure that we're all talking from the same space and we understand what accountability looks like in a system that's been disenfranchising us from the get-go. And so that's something I just wanted to make sure we had to offer in this conversation when we're particularly talking about the African American and Black community. Overall, if we talk about the city of Reading, that's a different conversation, because we're getting anti-Blackness from any other non-Black person in this community. So I want to make sure that that's also said in this conversation. Thank you.
No, that's good, Marquise.
His key word, the key words that he said a few times is acknowledging that it's happening. I mean, because you can't come to a solution if you're not acknowledging what is going on. It's hard for you. That's kind of like you walk in a room and the vase is already broken and you didn't see it. You can't put it back together. But if you acknowledge that you saw it at one point, you might have an idea of how to fix it. So you have to take the time to acknowledge it. And I think that's what happens a lot of times. Instead of acknowledging what's going on, other things are thrown at us. Well, what about Black on Black crime? Well, what about the fact that you've got a bunch of drug dealers? That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the 95% of African Americans that are good people, that are educated and are willing to make a difference, that are being put in one class of people because of the color of their skin. So the key word that he kept saying is acknowledgement. You have to acknowledge what's going on, or we won't be able to move forward. We'll be stuck right here where we're at, which is why we are where we're at right now. Just so many people won't take the time to just acknowledge what is going on.
Thank you. And you're absolutely right. I was on a call earlier today just to follow up on what Marquise shared. 25% of Latinos in the United States identify as Afro-Latino. So, understanding that we all, again, there are marginalized populations, again, that fall under, as Marquise said, that are being affected by this racism that is happening, that needs to be addressed head on. And until we address it and how it's affecting our African American community, it'll never get fixed. It will never, so we got to start at where it began if we're going to make any kind of progress. And that's, and that's how I feel. So thank you for that feedback. Again, before we move on to the next topic, anyone else want to add anything? I know we were just joined by, I believe, Elta Jackson. Henry joined us. Welcome, Elta. I know you're there.
Yes,
if you want to chime in, please let us know, okay?
I sure will. Thank you so much, Mike.
Excellent. So the next topic I'd like to bring up is for those in our community who wish to be an ally, who want to help. Those that say, well, I am an ally. I'm not racist. I'm an ally. Is that good enough? What does it really truly mean to be an ally in 2020? What ways, can our members of the community, what ways our police department can be allies in 2020 as it relates to trying to, again, end systemic racism? We'll open that up.
Well,
Well,
you sometimes people play an ally, but are they really? I mean, it's easy to have a personal conversation with me and tell me how much you want to support what's going on with Black people, how much you feel for me, you understand. And then when we're in a different setting, your voice is not heard. So you can't call yourself an ally if you're not going to be the same person in private and because I think that is what goes on a lot. I mean, it's great to have a private conversation with me as a friend to make me feel good. But then when I'm standing out in the forefront and you're standing back in the crowd and you're not moving up to the forefront to stand arm in arm with me, are you really my ally? Are you the person that's taking me down more than anyone else?
Yeah. One of the things that I've often said is, what you do speaks so loud, I can't hear what you say. At church, with respect to our faith, I often say Christians are like tea bags. You find out what they're made of when you put them in hot water. Well, you can say the same thing about friends. You can say the same thing about your friends. You find out what they're made of when the heat gets turned up. Are they there to stand with you, to walk with you, to go through it with you? Or are they just friends in name only, or just associates? Martin King said, all that's needed for evil to triumph is for people of goodwill to sit back and do nothing. And so, that, I guess you'll find out when stuff gets hot, who your friends are. And in fact, when you start, even as we tell white people, you need to police your community yourself in terms of your friends and those who tell the dirty jokes or the jokes about Black people or who are making stuff. You need to police them. And if they fall out with you over it, then maybe they weren't your friend to begin with. And you need to find some new friends.
Yeah. And even for me personally, I don't believe in allies. I don't think they exist because they can retreat from they can retreat back to whiteness. They can retreat back to things. I believe in accomplices and co-conspirators. That might be a thing. But in all reality, like, let's be very clear. Like, I don't trust anybody who declares himself an ally because I believe allyship is a verb. You have to just show up. I really don't care about words at all. That you can blow smoke for all I care. So when we see what false allyship looks like is also a lack of accountability on that part too, right? And so we can talk about yesterday, we saw a video at the protest and there was a cop saying, well, blue lives matter. I don't care if you're Black, brown, green, blue, whatever colors, don't care. You're blowing smoke at this point. You're a police officer who's able to participate in a very particular system. You might want to show up as an ally, but in reality, you're not showing up as an ally because the police force is still oppressing Black and brown communities, particularly poor communities, when we do have these conversations. So when I do talk about allyship, what it means is being accountable. What it means is the system is not going to be considered an ally. So I do appreciate that we do have police on this call, but I'm also going to be making sure that this is held to the fire, because at the end of the day, everybody likes to say, well, there's good cops. Well, if there were this many good cops, how come this many bad cops are still getting away with the stuff that they're doing, right? So where are they when we need them to show up at the end of the day? So if we are going to have this conversation on allyship, I need you to be a co-conspirator and understand that accountability comes in many forms. That means losing a job. Accountability means integrating within a community of people that you already go into the city of Reading and already think it's very specific on what that looks like. But then also the culture around it too, because we tend to use white people or police, but we have to understand that this is also non-Black people who participate in a lot of this too. So a lot of us get it confused. Growing up in the hood means you have the quote unquote nigga experience or the Black experience, and it's not. Right. So we went to school. We had this at our previous town hall, and we got made fun of because of the texture of our hair. That's anti-Blackness. That's not showing up as an ally. So when we do call people to task, and it's hard sometimes to decipher that when we grow up in the hood, That's what we're talking about when it comes to that's what I'm talking about when it comes to being a co-conspirator or being an accomplice. I need to see you on the front lines. I need you to take your privilege and use it and be okay with sacrificing it. If you're not willing to do that, I'm not accepting the bare minimum and you taking a knee at all. That's performative at best. So I just want us to be very clear, like, yeah. So that's what I mean when I say I don't believe in allies, and I need you to do better and hold your people accountable, especially since y'all are the people in power. And don't, So,
well, I kind of think of it this way: when you come into a community and a crime's been committed, you get upset when people won't snitch on who has done what. But why is it that you don't snitch on your coworkers who are doing the wrong thing? Because you can't tell me that every cop that has committed one of these crimes didn't have a pattern that the good cops did see, but they turned a blind eye. And that's supposed to be okay. But we are always being harped on about not snitching and not telling. Maybe people are thinking, well, why should I tell you? Did you tell the other week when I got knocked to the ground by one of your coworkers? Did you go back and report them? So you can't have it one way and not the other way. So you need to think of it. If you're asking me to snitch on who did what next door to me, I'm asking you to snitch on that cop that put their knee down on somebody's neck before a video comes out. I'm asking you to do that when you go back. I'm asking you to do that when you get in your car. I'm asking you to say to him, listen, you went overboard. That was too much. That shouldn't have happened. I'm asking for you to grab by his arm and pull him to the side like, hey, man, enough is enough. Let's just put him in cuffs. Let's just take him to the police station and let's let the system handle it. Not that I trust the system, but
that part.
at least that life has been spared if you step up and say something. I just don't get it. I just don't get. I know if I'm at work and someone is doing something that I don't think is right, as a friend, I would say to them, maybe not in front of everybody, but what you did was kind of, that was a little on the edge. You might want to be careful, or you might want to rethink it. I just can't get it. I guess I just don't get it is what I'm trying to say. I get that there's good cops. I am not saying that there's not. I think I said when we were talking before we came on that, Mark, I had someone just told me about you, how wonderful you were. So I get that there are good cops, but it's hard to think that you're good cops if you're not saying anything to the bad cops when you have to be seeing what they're doing. It just doesn't happen. They just don't go out that one day and do something. Currently, with the situation now, he had 18 complaints. So how many complaints can you get? If I had 18 complaints on my job, I wouldn't have a job.
Right. Let me ask this question.
I wholeheartedly agree. I wholeheartedly agree with you. I'm not sacrificing everything that I worked hard for because you want to come out here and you want to do those kind of things. I have a family, and because you want to come out here and be a certain way, that's not right. I won't do that. And that, like you said, that's not all of us. And the one thing as being one of the older officers in the department, I will pull a young officer to the side and I will say, hey, listen, nope, not while I'm here. I will do that. And it takes more of that attitude to change, to change where we are.
Yes.
And that's why we're here today. And we're not saying much because I'm a listener before I speak. And you're absolutely right. It starts with us. And we have to change this division that we have from the community and the officers. And that the biggest division we have is that police car. Because for 8 hours, we're in that car and we do circles. If we don't get out of that car and talk to people, say who we are, this is where we're coming from, we'll always have that division.
Yes.
And that's something we need to really get away from. We used to do that once upon a time when we had about 200 and something officers strong, where we got out and we did parking walks. And unfortunately, being the fact that we had a lot of retirements happen, our manpower went down, our call volume stayed the same. But at the same time, we don't all think the same. I love the community that I serve. I will get out here with these kids, play football, talk to them about life, do everything I can, because I don't take any joy of putting handcuffs on a human being. I don't. And it breaks my heart even more when I do it to someone of my own culture. And every time it happens, I tell them this breaks my heart. It really does. Right. So to let you know that, you know, from where I'm coming from, when this uniform comes off, I am a black male in America. I'm a black man in Walmart. I'm a black man in the supermarket. I am who I am. You know, when I go to work, I put a uniform on, and my uniform to me spells change for the community, for me. And I'm trying to do my part by passing that down to other officers. Now, understand something too. We have officers that have never been in the inner city until they're giving power, police power. So there's no, once you give that power and they're in the inner city, they never have a chance to learn who the people are. They're basically learning because that microphone doesn't say all the good things happen in Reading. That microphone that we listen to on our radio is every negative thing that's happening in the city of Reading. So what's their perception of the people? It's going to be negative. It's no different than people who live in white suburbia, right, who may not have black friends that don't have connection to the city, and they turn on the news, and guess what? The only thing you see of someone of color is in handcuffs or getting beat by police. So because they don't have that real interaction, what are they left with making that decision about people of color? So that has to change also.
This is Elta.
Crystal?
And I thank you as well.
Elta, I'm sorry, Elta?
Just very quickly, I really want to thank you for what you've said. You've really expressed from your heart that you are human, you are a black man, and, you know, more than just the blue, because we talk about the blue, but you're talking about your humanity, and that's very important. I don't know if Officer Shade, Luce Shade is on the line with us, but she has been very interactive in the community. Hi, you know, I met hi. She has been so integral in our community, and I'm wondering if officers like Lieutenant or Sergeant Shade goes back to the other officers and shares the positivity that's happening in the community. I think the officers that do engage in the community can go back and do cultural competency training with the other officers. Does that happen on a regular basis so that it's not just the negative? The criminal activity that's being broadcast over the radio, that's being shared. And also I wonder about when there are stops that are made, are there language line or translators available for Spanish, for Creole, for languages, so that there's no miscommunication that happens in our communities? Does that also happen? Those were my two questions.
Also, to answer your first question, we're fortunate enough that when we do something positive in the city, and we do a lot of it, sometimes it may not be seen by many, but I'm the community response coordinator here for the Reading Police Department, and I get to interact in a very positive nature with the community. So I'm fortunate in that aspect. And we do get to report back to our superiors, in this case, my deputy chief and my chief, and these are things that are expanded out through the department. We also do ask for other officers to come out when we're doing community outreach in a positive manner. And as far as the language lines, we do have a language line here, and I forget how many languages, but it's pretty many. However, mostly what we encounter is someone that may not speak English that is Spanish speaking. And we have, most of the time we do have a Spanish speaker.
We can't hear you, Luz.
Oh, they can't. They couldn't hear.
Oh, we hear you now, Luz. Now we hear you now, Luz. We hear you now.
We hear you now.
Go ahead. About 10 seconds.
I'm not sure how.
About 10 seconds.
Okay, so I think the last thing I was saying was about the language line. Nelson had asked if we have someone that can help if there's a language barrier, and we do. And I think the last thing I also said was that mostly it's Spanish speaking. So we do have, most of the time we do have Spanish speaking officers on. So we're able to pull with those resources and be able to translate for whatever the encounter may be.
Thank you, Luz. I know Marquise wanted to share something. Marquise?
Yeah. So we have to be very clear in this conversation again. I appreciate the humanity that was brought into this conversation, but we're talking about a system that doesn't recognize the city of Reading as a human. It doesn't respect the city of Reading as people, right? So when we're having these conversations, we are talking about a system, not individuals. It's the same conversation when people say, not all white people. No. At the end of the day, we're talking about white supremacy. Don't pull that not all white people, because what that does is absolve y'all of responsibility of this. So I want us to be very clear in this conversation sometimes. So I do appreciate the anecdotes and the good stuff, but in reality, the great stuff looks like holding your police accountable. The great stuff looks like a Black man not being brutalized in front of a turkey hill. Great stuff looks like police officers not telling us Brianna was shot in her home after the fact, after somebody called 911. A good cop, a great system does not look like us having to find out 3 months later that Ahmaud Arbery was killed by white supremacists. That's what a system looks like. Again, when we're having this conversation, and the reason I'm sounding a lot more frustrated and very unimpressed is because of the fact that we are talking about a system that does not care about the people. So even if we talk about that people who are outside of the city of Reading and their first job is to come inside the city of Reading, you have to check them on their racist attitudes. They need to learn anti-racism, because what they just came in with anti-Black sentiments and already categorized people of color as danger. It does not matter. You teach your children not to judge people based off the color of their skin. You teach your children not to be a white supremacist. You teach your children not to do harmful things. So at the end of the day, what you're bringing people into is causing more harm to a community than it is doing good to a community. So there's research out there. If most officers in the force look like the people and come from the people and live in the community, 40% goes down in terms of police brutality and goes down in issues. Increased policing does not actually help. It causes more harm to a community because of there being more anxiety, because we have to understand, we're talking about the hood, we're talking about generational trauma, right? So if we want to talk about humanity, we're talking about a group of peoples that went through racist acts, that went through extreme police violence, that what we're seeing today was Rodney King, right? So when we are having these conversations, let's be very clear. And I'm gonna continue to hold y'all to the fire and not have the flowery language and the cute stuff, because what change looks like is making sure somebody doesn't get paid administrative leave when they commit police brutality and aren't held responsible, right? So that's the problem, because they're still getting rewarded for bad behavior. How does that make sense, right? So once again, when we're having this conversation, I appreciate the humanity and I get it, but at the end of the day, 4 Black cops and a Black judge was involved in Freddie Gray and they still got off. He did not get justice, right? It's still the blue before Black in most cases. There can be individual outliers, but that is not the norm. So I want us to be very clear in these conversations, and I appreciate y'all and I respect it, but I do not respect that we're trying to go around this. This idea of unity does not equal justice in my eyes, and it's not correlating right now. So I want us to be very, very clear and very critical in this conversation. So I'm not going to let up. I'm going to continue to hold this police department accountable. And I want to make sure that whatever funds is getting allocated to police for bad behavior needs to make sure it's reinvested in community, because I'm looking at some of these numbers in terms of police allocation and who's getting what in terms of salary and how much is actually going into community and education. There's disparities happening and these things don't make sense. So at the end of the day, it's a system, but we're putting resources into the bad people. We're not putting resources into the fact that if you put resources into the community, less bad things happen. So from a mayoral standpoint or a council people standpoint, put the money into the people, not put the money into the ones who oppress us. That might be a start in terms of what we're going to have about these conversations. So once again, whatever that training looks like, you need to make sure there's critical anti-racist training, make sure that the majority of the community is represented in this police force if we have to deal with it. but also know when you're coming into here, there needs to be community accountability on what y'all are doing within the community. So instead of patrolling and policing, actually worry about the fact that you're dealing with humans first and foremost who don't have food, who have to work multiple jobs. You're dealing with an undocumented population on top of that. We're dealing with racism from all fronts. We're dealing with anti-Black racism from every non-Black person of color. So let's be very clear when we do have these conversations, because I'm not about to just sit here and have a nice conversation at the table when we know damn well that people are still dying at rapid rates. And Black people, Black trans women in particular, are dying at rapid rates. So I appreciate the sentiments. It's cute, but my life is not about to be about flowery conversation at all.
But you know what? It's real, and it has to start somewhere. And I started that with me.
Right.
It has to start with one person.
Absolutely.
That's how change happens. It's not flowery. It's real. It's real. If Martin Luther King himself did not come forward to make change, then what would we have today? What would we have? Somebody has to start this. We can march all day, all night long. But if someone doesn't come forward with solutions, what do we have?
Right.
So
That's
you
exactly
can
what
talk
LA
about,
did.
you can
Defund
talk
the
about,
police.
you can talk, hold on. You can talk about the system, but let's stop getting philosophical and let's be real, okay? Let's stop talking about the system and let's start talking about individuals.
That's not how that works, right? So when we, the fact of the matter is, system, y'all are a group of people, correct? It's a group of people. So when we're talking about this system in particular, you all participate in this system, correct? So when we are talking about police and those who benefit from it, the same way, let's analogy, white privilege. Who benefits from white privilege? White people, right? And so when we talk about racists who are able to benefit from this, we're not talking about, oh, well, my friend Joe is my neighbor and he did a really good thing today. That's not absolving the fact that he probably has a racist family. It doesn't absolve the fact that he's not willing to give up that privilege at the end of the day. So when I'm talking about a police officer and police officers, you're all part of a full mechanism. So once again, when I am having this conversation, it is not a personal dig at you. My cousin was a police officer in the city of Philadelphia, and he got ousted because of the fact that he spoke up against the police brutality that was going on in this city. So he could not participate in a system that did not value his Blackness. So at the end of the day, when we talk about institutionalized racism, the violence and the very real violence, I'm talking about the fact that I get stopped in the city of Reading because they think I look like some Jamal down the street. I'm talking about the fact that they will pull a gun out on me because I look like somebody. I'm talking about the fact that there is still violence that we are seeing. So these are very real things, and I am somebody who was a victim of that. So when I'm having these conversations, it is not, we can have there's a good apple, but the roots are rotten, right? The tree is trash, right? So when we are having this conversation, accountability is something that I'm talking about. Acknowledgement is something I'm talking about. So I'm not discussing the individual when I'm having this conversation. I'm discussing the system when I'm having this conversation and the mechanisms that allow y'all to work. So once again, I pointed out the examples. Y'all are still getting congratulated for bad behavior. Paid administrative leave does not make sense to me. The fact of the matter is you're still getting an increased budget for 2020. Well, I don't understand what that means, right? Because if you're still not doing that job, and again, another thing I was saying is investing the money that keeps going into bad behavior into the youth and the community. So that's why I'm saying if we want a solution on the end of this, I'm talking about lives that are being lost. So we can break down a system that's not for us if we put the money where the mouth is, where we put money into homes, where we put money into education, so we don't have people who are stressed out and have to resort to these things in order to survive. We're talking about a group of people that are surviving, right? We can talk about the fact that they want to talk about Reading being one of the poorest nations. That's systemic racism. That's institutionalized racism, right? Are you back?
We're good.
Okay.
Go ahead.
That's what I'm talking about. So when we talk about the lack of education, we talk about the funding, when we talk about the fact that the state of Pennsylvania and Reading School District is the third most underfunded school in the Pennsylvania state. That is what I'm talking about. These are all things that work in tandem with one another, because you cannot expect a student to be able to have a successful career if they are not eating at home, if they cannot perform the best at school, if they are getting reprimanded, which are Black girls who get reprimanded the most at schools due to systemic racism. And if those are the people that are not able to do so, and they go out into the world not equipped to do what they're able to do, that is what I'm talking about, because all of these things stack on top of one another. Okay, as me going through the Reading School District and seeing this stuff firsthand, and I'm not a Black woman to really talk about the trash that we dealt with. Like, let's be very clear. I'm not making a personal attack at you at all. I see you are a Black man, right? But I'm also acknowledging the fact that you are talking from a place of privilege because you are participating in a system that does not bangs with poor people overall. So I'm talking about that. So that's why I talked about specifically funds need to go into community and developing community versus going into the people that make community stressed out and cause more anxiety and break up homes. That is what I'm talking about. There should be more spaces for healing. There should be more centers for therapy. There should be more centers for community discussion and education, but we do not invest in those. We invest in the stuff that is killing our very people that got us to where we are at today. There's plenty of research. There's plenty of examples that we can utilize, and we're choosing to not. So again, when I tell you I'm in this conversation and I'm not gonna continue to use flowery language, we need to talk about where these dollars are going. We need to talk about who is actually being oppressed, and we need to talk about those who are participating in these systems. I'm not playing that game today, and I'm not about to have my face be played with in my face. Like, that doesn't make sense to me.
And
so again, no disrespect to you, but understand, like, I do this on a regular basis. I work in the education space and I see these students every single day. There's a different kind of anxiety. You can't tell me a brother got shot and I have to go and actually participate and work. The fact that I had to work today when I'm dealing with all this trauma, y'all gotta be bugging. No, that's not it. So that's my rant right there. So again, no disrespect to you, but we have to be very clear in these conversations, because if not, we're blowing smoke and there's no progress we made, period.
Well,
Marquise,
go ahead, Crystal.
Marquise, what you were saying is not a rant. It's called you're expressing how you feel and how you're saying that you don't want to hear these things, you want to see change. So your rant was okay because your rant was heartfelt. I have to be honest, I felt both of you. I felt the officer, and when he said, when he takes off that uniform, he is a Black man in the Walmart, okay? Which means that at some point he realizes, once I take my uniform off, I am the Black man that now can be pulled over. I am the Black man that now can be put in the handcuffs because I don't have my uniform on. But I do feel your pain of, my brother, get in there, speak up, say something. When you see this stuff happening, point it out. Point to them, like, we're not going to do that today. And that's kind of what you were saying. And then put the money where your mouth is right. Because if you do create a better space for people, they are able to function without having the problems in their community, because they have the means to the ends. So don't say your rant, that's it for your rant, because you're a very powerful young Black man. And when you speak, you command people to listen to you because you have the knowledge, you have the wherewithal to tell people, I hear you over here, but this is what we need to do over here so we can get things changed. So as long as you're in my space, I don't want to hear you say, that's my rant, I'm done. I want to keep hearing your rants, because the more you rant, you're teaching me as a 50-year-old woman some things that I've never even really thought about. Keep pushing. And Mark, I appreciate you too. I mean, because you did make a valid point. When you said when you take off your uniform and you go to Walmart, you're seen as a Black man. I felt you. I felt you as a human being when you said that, because you're absolutely right. When you come out of that uniform, they still see you as a Black man, which also means the people you're working with, you may be saying something to them, but they still see you as a Black man. And that is part of what we're talking about. When will we be seen as just powerful, educated people that have a mindset to do the same thing you're doing next to me? But because I'm a Black man or a Black woman, I possibly can't be that intelligent to make it happen or make it work out. We had a black man 8 years and people still talked about what did he do. Well, you can't see what he did because all you saw was his black skin for 8 years. So I hear it from both of you.
I want to thank you all, because this is the platform provided to have these type of courageous conversations. As we started off the call, we said we may not agree on perspective or lens. We may have different ways to getting where we all feel we want to go, which is equity for all and social justice for all. But these are conversations that people are afraid to have. And we have a venue now where we have thousands of people who are watching, thousands of people who I hope are learning and are opening up their minds to different perspectives and seeing the real pain that's out there. So again, no reason to apologize. Again, we're all here trying to get to the same place from different points, but we're trying to get to the same place. So there's another topic I want to go to, but is there anyone else that hasn't spoken want to touch upon the conversation that we're here before we go to the next topic? Okay, wonderful. So again, this is a segue to what Marquise was talking about in terms of, so what are the appropriate ways now that we as a community, how do we support the healing? What is the process that we as a community must take? What does that look like? So if there are funding decisions being made in the community, what must the community do to ask the questions about what that is and why is that taking place? What are the steps that as a community that we want to see done or that you'd like to see happen in our community to help keep the narrative going? Because what I fear is, like every other news, whatever's hot right now, in a couple of weeks, it will dissipate, it will go away, and the conversation will no longer take place. We can't allow that. If we want to see change, we can't allow the conversation to cease. We must take conversation and turn it into action in some capacity. What does action look like for us in our community? Can we have some conversation around that? And again, what does action look like from the police department perspective? I would welcome hearing that. What does it look like in our general population? Councilwoman Johanny, what does that look like as a councilwoman? What are some of the things that we might be able to do or that we'd like to see happen? And again, I will open the floor. Again, like to have other people just to get other perspectives and feedback, please. Okay. Anyone?
Okay. We thought we lost communication.
Well, we hear you.
We can hear you.
I don't think, is Johanny muted?
No, Johanny seems like she's muted, and you asked her. We can't hear her. She's speaking.
No, Johanny's not speaking. Johnny, were you trying to say something? Okay. So anyone can just speak on, what are some things that we can do? What are some ways that, again, we're at a point now, we know what's happened in the past. We know what we're dealing with systemically. What are some of the things that we should be doing now? What are things that are happening now? What are ways that we can help to move the needle moving forward? What needs to be done? That's what I'd like to hear, different perspectives on what we could do.
Well, I think one thing, to hear the people. I mean, for me as an officer, usually when I come in contact with people, it's because of issues that they're having. It's not being one-on-one with somebody. One thing I've done is I've contacted Stacey Taylor from the NAACP Reading chapter to speak to her about speaking to the people, coming together under one roof and letting people speak, kind of like what we're doing now. We can't make moves if you don't know what people are upset about, what they want, what they're lacking.
Thank you.
I think Marquise.
Go ahead, Pastor Alex.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think Marquise was onto something when he was talking about the allocation and the distribution of resources. Absolutely. One of the things coronavirus helped us to see was the disparity in our community about resources, lack of funding, the unavailability of healthcare, and even the fear of going to get it done, or the lack of mobile testing in our communities when we knew that the Black community and we're more affected by this than anybody. Or, as he said, paid leave for officers who do the wrong thing. Why is that? Why does it take so long to arrest an officer when we clearly have video that shows they've done something wrong? If I was caught on video breaking into Wawa, trust me, they'd come after me. I'd be handcuffed, locked up, and then we talk about due process and all the other stuff. So I think just looking at how community funding and things like that are distributed, the kinds of grants that come down and how they're allocated in the communities, I think that's a good place to start in terms of what we do and what it is we look at. I feel for the police. Now, this is me talking personally. Marquise, allow me this moment because I recognize collective as well as individual. Because I don't paint the police force as I think you tried to make clear with one broad stroke, that if they're one bad officer or two bad, then they're all bad. That's like saying because there are some preachers out here that acted stupid, they're all stupid, or they're all stealing or whatever. And I would hope my members would know me better than that. So I feel for them. But at the same time, the collective anger that has emerged because of the systemic institutional racism and classism or whatever other ism you want to say is built in, it's almost as though it's encoded in the DNA of how we do things. That has to be changed, and dialogues like this are a good place to start. If we ain't talking to each other, we'll never be able to bring about the changes we're talking about, or at least to make people wake up and see what's going on. So I think at least even this much, as small as some people may say it is, this is a start. This is a start. Now, I don't want it to just be all talk because quite frankly, I'm sick and tired of talks. I've been on more conference calls than I can count since coronavirus started, and now this added to it. The George Floyd situation, Ahmaud Arbery, all of these other things piling in. And quite frankly, folk are just getting weary. And everybody's been quoting Dr. King's comment about the stuff you see going on in the streets. It's because that's the language of the unheard. But maybe there's some validity to that because people are saying, if this is the only way I get your attention, I'm going to burn it all down, because I'm sick of the nonsense. I'm sick of the meetings. I'm sick of the talking. And then once the talking is done, nothing else goes. Everything just returns back to status quo. So there's gotta be interface. There's gotta be meeting. There's gotta be talking. We have to talk, but we also have to listen. We have to really, even to the painful truths that we may not want to admit about our own complicity in what's going on. We have to be able to have that conversation. And so, Mike, that's why I'm glad you're doing what you're doing, man. That's why I'm here. And Marquise, that's why I appreciate what you said. I really do.
Mm-hmm. That's what this is about. I mean, again, it's about courageous conversations, and it's about getting the narrative out there. But some people are afraid to hear this, but we have to be able to put it out there so that conversations can take place.
And I guess, if we're going to talk about some type of action, that whatever that looks like I said, hit them in their pockets. That's where it comes from, period.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Hit them in the pockets, because that's what that is.
That'll wake them up quick.
Right. Because, okay, you got to go. Bye. Keep it pushing. Secondly, I think it's also starting with trauma. That's what we're talking about here at the end of the day and in its core. We're talking about a group of people who And if we're talking about Reading specifically, the reason I keep bringing up undocumented people is because it's not just the undocumented people that we think it looks like. We have Haitians, we have Dominicans, we have Mexican people, we have so many different types of undocumented people in here. So again, when we are having this conversation, like, I want us to be clear, like, how are we also helping out these communities? How are we defunding those detention centers? How are we also like making sure that we're not re-traumatizing the people in our spaces? So I do believe wholeheartedly that we need to continue having this conversation on what healing looks like and what actionable healing looks like. But at the end of the day, I'm not sitting at a table with a racist, right? I'm not going to sit at a table with a racist. I'm not going to continue to sit at a table with somebody who's oppressing me. So when we're having this conversation and cops are and we're talking about the police force and police departments, you have to understand that symbolism right there in itself, something's not connecting. I'm not going to connect with you because I understand that it's better for me to have to avoid you rather than having to be there with you, because there's a 50% chance that I'm coming out of that alive. That is the real, and I'm not even giving you 50-50 to keep it a buck. I'm giving you an 80-20 at this point to keep it a bean. So when we are having these conversations, like, this is what accountability looks like, but accountability also means defunding police departments in various areas. California, you can see what they just did in LA. If you need to see what a standard looks like, they had another thing where they reformed their entire system in New Jersey. There's another space that you can look at and seeing how they redid that and really understand what police accountability looked like, but also how you can integrate in a community. At the end of the day, there might need to be an order where the majority, I personally don't think police departments, I'm big on like abolishing prisons and stuff. Really don't care about that stuff because it does more harm than good. So when we are having this, we want to have also a transformative conversation and restorative conversation. So you have to acknowledge the hurt that was done. We have to know how to come to a group of people, because if we're talking about this, I do this with my students all the time. Restorative justice means that we have to acknowledge the hurt and we have to come to a conclusion as to how we can remedy what that hurt is. When we talk about transformative justice, that's when we're actually talking about how all of these things play in part with one another in order to do so. So it's not just a police issue, it's overall a governmental issue, because we're talking about state-sanctioned violence. And violence comes in very different ways. Violence comes in starvation, violence comes in trauma, violence comes in actual putting a gun to my face. Those are different forms of violence that we need to talk about. So once again, like, think about investing in spaces of healing. So I don't know if that's a council thing or a mayor's office thing. Figure out like how the community can also integrate in these systems, because we have our barbers. If we want to keep it a beat, barbers are our first therapist. Your hairstylist is your first therapist. Like, you're committed to them from the get-go, right? And so how can we utilize the skills that they have to command a room? How do we use the skills that a pastor or a preacher may have to command a complete congregation? How do we resurface what these things look like and make sure that at the end of the day, before the police aren't going to have us, and that's not changing overnight, point blank, period. This is a system that it was built for 400 years. It's going to take another 400 years to break that stuff down. Yeah. Right. So at the end of the day, this stuff is not going to change overnight. But if we talk about immediate actions, lose that funding, invest in the community, make sure people are not starving in their communities, and make sure the undocumented population is also taken care of, and make sure accessibility is there for everybody. So there should be a translator on this call. If we're going to be keeping a buck, there should be people that are able to know how to take these conversations somewhere else and know how to have this language. But oftentimes we don't have this language. And for me, I'm 24. So most people that I'm having conversations with, we're all moving from a lot of this similar framework. And they might not have the language that I'm using, but to keep it a buck, we say the system's fucked up. I'm saying structural racism. We're saying the same thing. So I just want us to make sure that we are keeping that as clear as possible in these spaces. So once again, those are some solutions that I did have moving forward.
Well, go ahead, Crystal.
Just to touch on what you said though, Marquise, you said something very, very interesting, that you don't want to sit down with them because you already know the end result and you might not come out of being in the room with a police officer. That pains me. And I'll tell you why it pains me, because, growing up, my dad would say to me, if you get into trouble, go to a police officer because they're supposed to protect you, right? The fact that you don't see any protection in them That's the broken piece right there. You may not want to sit in a room with them, but we've got to get in a room with them, because the three people that I see sitting in front of me, the three police officers, I know all of them. I've seen their work. I've been in the same area with them. I've worked with a few of them at community events. So I know them. They're not the police officers we need to be in the room with talking to. The police officers that we need to be in the room talking to are the ones that are doing the things the wrong way. Because I think they need to hear it. They need to hear that it's not okay from the community, face to face, not through me protesting, not through me having a meeting, this, that, and the third, where they're not there. They need to be there. Sometimes you need to see the emotion of someone to understand just how much you are doing to that person, if that makes any sense. And you, when you said that you don't want to do it because you went from 50-50 to 80-20, that brings me that as a Black man, you think you have a 20% chance of surviving being in an interaction with the police officer.
Right.
And
that's even lucky because I'm a respectable Negro on top of that. Like,
I really hope that as police officers, you heard what the young brother said. He only thinks he has a 20% chance of just being in a room with you. That alone, if I was a cop who took on a responsibility to protect someone, and I heard that they thought they only had a 20% to be protected by me, it would make me question what I'm doing in my job. But see, to do that, you have to be conscious. To do that, you have to have some kind of compassion and some kind of sympathy for things that are going on around you. If you wake up being a racist, you go to work being a racist. That is point blank, period. So I'm saying that to say that that's probably the people that he's afraid of the most, because they're not giving him half a chance. They don't want to hear him, which is why he doesn't want to sit in a room with them, because they've already made up their mind before he walks in that room. He's a Black man, he's ignorant, and if I get the chance, I'm going to put him in a chokehold.
Right, and and even just to echo off of that, like, remember, I still have the privilege because people see me and they're just like, oh, he's respectable, right? Like, that's not even giving a chance to those who don't have 4-year degrees. Like, I went to college and I have a certain level of privilege that to an extent plays a role, because you're just like, oh, the way he speaks, I can somewhat justify his humanity. But that's not going to be the same for my little brother who does not use the same language that I use. I can be an exception to the rule. Like that, and that's why I said maybe I'll give myself 70-30, but everybody else, that chance is not coming for them very quickly because of the respectability that also plays into Blackness. So this is a long and much more nuanced conversation that we are having. So I just want to add that level into there too.
No, and we appreciate.
And you know what?
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. And I respect your pain, Marquise, and even through your comment, understand something, and I want you to hear this. Number one, I don't know who you are as my first time meeting you, but understand something, and Dr. Alec, I think you can attest to this. First and foremost, I am a child of God. I am in the Word every day, and God holds me accountable to love you, no matter what, no matter what. And I preach that every day, and that's in action every day. And even hearing your words, as hurtful as it is to me, I still love you. And your pain is a concern of mine, and it's gonna actually help me. Okay, it's gonna help me love that much more. Okay, because of your pain. So my brother, when I tell you this, hear my words, and I understand where you're coming from, and I understand you're hurting, but I love you. And a lot of times you can't look at the uniform. I know right now because of the pain, you see the uniform no matter what. But let me tell you something. If I die tomorrow, God is not going to judge me because of the color of my skin, because he does not care. Whether I am Black, white, Puerto Rican, it does not matter. So I love you. I hear you're in pain, and I hope that we can get together one day and talk, because that hurts. It really does. And I do have love for you. So you should know that.
Thank you. And again, as I sit here, This is an opportunity for us to come together, bringing people together. And my hope is that this is just the beginning of future meetings to get together, future opportunities to continue to have these conversations. Because again, this is not easy. This is not, if it was easy, it would have been done already.
There you go.
I mean, come on now.
That's right.
Look at the
You're
people
right.
that are here, on this
That's
call.
real.
We all have a role to play. We all have a perspective to bring to the table. Again, we're not going to have all the answers right here, right now. But if we can light a spark to engage, to mobilize, to get people working together to make it better for everyone, then that's what we should do. Okay, you have to be about it. And that's what the conversation that I'm hearing about tonight is. It's uncomfortable, but it's conversation that's needed. And again, I hope that the two of you, I hope that all of us are committed to getting together again and continuing this dialogue, and that it's beyond dialogue, that it becomes action.
Right.
That's what I hope that we get to.
That's what we want.
Right. Correct. Because without it, we're nowhere.
Absolutely. Councilwoman Johanny.
I'm listening and I'm taking notes, and like for the first time, I'm at a loss for words. However, because I'm not sure even within my own role or the position that I hold, what role it is that I can play, because I'm also in a system, right? So when we think about this is what I'm thinking about is how do I begin to break down the system to transform it so that we're fair, that it's fair for everyone, that it's not judged based on how you look. And Marquise, you brought up some great solutions to what we can begin doing. And funding is key. Like I know I play a role in funding and budget allocations and so on. So I know that's something that I can definitely bring back. But to our Reading Police Department, and to Crystal's point, what does that conversation look like? Like with that group of people that behave in that manner, what does it look like? What space is created for that conversation to take place? Because those are things as we continue to dialogue, right? These are things that I think are within our reach to tackle. Now, granted, Mark, you said we could have a town hall meetings to hear the voice of the people, hear their issues, their concerns, and provide possible solutions to some of that. But then we have the group of men and women that work in our law enforcement. We want to hear also them. And I think, Crystal, in a side conversation that we had amongst women, right. I remember you brought up, you said, I would love to ask, what is it about me that you hate? Right. That's right. Powerful. Because I think that we have to get that out. What is it about me that you hate?
I did. I mean, I even that I was.
I don't have I'm just I'm a very emotional being, and as I'm listening, I stumble through my words because I'm feeling it all. You understand? And I'm really trying to make sense of, because I do want it to change, and I want to be part of that change. I don't want it to just dialogue and talk, because we've been doing that for way too many years. Like, this is just completely unacceptable, what we're facing, what we're seeing. And our young ones are watching this on the news, and they're already being traumatized by this experience. So it's gonna take a whole lot of healing. And I'm a little lost for words, because I'm like, goodness, where do we begin? Because there's just so much healing that has to take place. So bear with me, I'm writing down, I'm taking notes, but we have to break this down further and create a plan for each action item, because it's deeply rooted. It's just so many levels, and it's gonna take a whole lot of us.
Right, that's right.
Can I just say something? Just to the police officers, imagine this. You're on a call. The person you're on the call with, there are people around, they're videotaping. That person is doing something that they should not be doing. Imagine the support you would get from a brother like Marquise if he actually witnessed you at that very moment. Say to the person you were with, enough. Let's just enough. Now, not only not only will people see it, but people will hear it, and then people will somewhat try to believe it because they've witnessed it. You know, what we're witnessing you doing is all negative. Just like you said, you know, what you hear on your walkie-talkie is all negative about Reading, right? So what we're witnessing is the negativity of the cops. Just imagine if one time you're on a call and someone is not doing what they're supposed to be doing, and you actually call them out right there, like enough. Do you know the respect you would gain? I know that I would start to think like, okay, so there's one of those good cops that they talk about. Like, I believe there's good and bad in everything. There's good and bad in everything that in life. There's good and bad. So don't get me wrong. Like the Reverend said, just because there's one person out here cutting up, don't mean that all reverends are cutting up. But just because one black man is out here cutting up, doesn't mean all black men are cutting up. So you can't play the game with one situation and not with another. So we can't keep saying there's good cops, there's good cops. There are some damn good black men out here, and some of them are my brothers, my cousins, my uncles, and my father. So if you're gonna have the word that there's good cops, keep in mind when you're out there, that black man that you're about to arrest could be a good black man, but he could just be tired of what has been going on. And his actions may not be what you would normally see from him. His actions are just because, like Marquis said, the fear of not making it home because he's in the mix of a police officer.
Right.
So I just ask you to hold on to that.
And also, like, I just want to be very clear. I respect humanity. Johanny will tell you I'm always laughing. You hear me cackling before anything, right? Right. But when I am also having this conversation, do not take it as a personal attack on the individual, because it's not, at the end of the day, I was just saying to myself, like, I can respect feelings. I teach my students to know how to de-escalate situations. So they're very clear on, like, let's have a conversation. Let's come to an agreement. Let's talk this situation down, figure out how we were all harmed in this situation, and move from there. Awesome. But when I'm also having this conversation in terms of power and privilege dynamics, that's why I'm not going to give the benefit of the doubt to somebody who might have a knife already halfway in my back. I refuse. So again, it's not you, I'm not saying you particularly, but those who decide to put on blue, that's a choice. I didn't decide to be black, right? You didn't decide to be black. Y'all made a choice to go into this very profession, and the taintedness of the profession is there, right? And so once again, when we're talking about these systems, even when I'm talking about white people, I'm talking about whiteness overall. I'm talking about that construct that people believe they have this power over black people who they believe are second-class citizens. That is what I'm talking about. So it's that inherent, there's just a switch when a suit comes on. There's a switch when you think a white person and a black person are in the same space. There's a switch. There's a specific choice that you decide to make in these movements. There's a choice that you decide to put onto that uniform and go into a system that was never designed for a black person to begin with, right? So we have to be clear when we're talking about history. We have to be clear when we talk about your actions. We have to be clear when we're talking about humanity. You participate in a system that does not recognize black humanity whatsoever, right? And that is what I am talking about. And that is the painful, obvious truth of a lot of these spaces. So once again, when we do talk about the police department, and somebody in the comment asked me about defunding the police, it is meaning that you have to start, literally what we're seeing from these riots, you're burning down to build up. But when you're building up, make sure you have black people in mind and recognizing their humanity in mind. And that is where that starts. That's what the healing looks like. That is what accountability looks like. And there is no choice but for you to have to acknowledge that pain, because we will see that broken window until it is fixed. We will see that, and it will continue to break until it is fixed. So at the end of the day, I respect you, black man. I do not currently respect the system that does not respect me, that does not respect us. And it doesn't matter if you're working from the inside or if you're working from the outside. My people come first, point blank period, black first all the time. And just making sure we're always working from the same framework. That is why I'm also like defining some of these terms too, so that way people in the comments and people who are watching this are also gaining some form of education, because that's where I'm coming from, a space of first and foremost. But now accountability and action is going to look much different. So it is going to take some work. You're going to have to deal with some very pissed off police officers who find out defunding them means somebody is losing their job, and they're going to have to find something else to do, because I'd rather them lose their job than me lose my life. And these are going to be the difference in extremes that we have to start working in when we're having these very real conversations, because you're not about to arrest me when I work in the education space, and now I can't even get back into working a job. I can't be around students. I can't do this. I can't do this, because that felony, you take away humanity so fast with a felony, and there's plenty of books out there. The New Jim Crow, you can watch documentaries if that works for you. 13. We see once that scarlet letter is essentially branded onto us that we're a felon and we have to check that box, opportunity is taking away from everybody. Right. So when we're talking about the opportunity, that is what's also being taken away. And that's what police participate in when they decide to do that. Because once you put them into that prison system, getting out of it and recovering from that, and because the prison system is so tied closely to my personal life and my personal family who have to deal with this, that is why I'm talking about that, because we're recognizing the humanity that my father had to go through, trying to get back out into a system and trying to get out and make sense of the world when it was very particular and defined for him in those four walls that we talk about, that is prison. And so having to step outside of that and not know what to do in the world, because nobody is vouching for those who are in prison. Nobody is seeing the humanity of those in prison. Nobody is seeing the humanity when you make this decision to put these people in prison. You now take away hella opportunities, because not many people are hiring ex-felons, right?
Well, there also has to be accountability to the person also.
There's still accountability to the person, but what I'm talking about when I talk about transformative justice is acknowledging the fact that there are 5 billion other things that got that person there. There is that he was probably hungry that day. He's probably working 2 jobs that day. He probably has to make sure he's taking care of a multi-generational family living in one house that day. And so when we're talking about the system that I keep referring back to, that is what I'm talking about. That fear that if I get stopped, people even look at people in protest. There are some Black immigrants in these protests and undocumented people. ICE is going into these protests. They want to fight for their freedom, but also that comes out of risk, because that means you can go back to a space you don't know. That means you can lose family, you can lose your humanity. So once again, we can talk about accountability, but talking about accountability for the individual means you also have to acknowledge the systems that got that individual there, because keep it simple. I cannot get an A on a test. You cannot expect me to take a test if I'm hungry. You cannot expect me to take a test if I'm tired. I go to school, then I had to go to work at McDonald's till 11 o'clock at night, got up at 6 o'clock to catch a bus by 6:45 to go do that all over again and take all AP classes on top of that. And that's talking about my personal experience. I'm sleeping. I'm surprised I graduated from Reading High the way I did my senior year, because I was exhausted from taking care of my family and having to make sure I got to college and trying to maintain some sense of a social life. So when you see all of these compounding factors into one, and it's a single parent household on top of that, you have to understand everything that played a role, which is why I keep saying, if you invest in the people and invest in the community, we will not have to have the policing the way that we do, because you'll be able to see the people work at the best of their ability and be a full human being that they should be designed to be. And we don't even recognize that little bit. So don't take it as a personal shot.
You also have to have the people buy into that. I've been here 15 and a half years.
Comes from.
You know what I mean?
Trauma.
Like, that's what I'm saying. You know what I mean? You can lead a horse to the water, but you can't force him to drink. And I agree with providing resources and all that, but you know, you were blessed to be able to go through that and come out on top and be successful. There's a lot of households in this city and other inner cities where these kids don't have that. And there's a cycle where they're not being taught positive. They're not being taught how to get out of that situation. You know what I mean? So I agree, you know, those resources, absolutely. I wholeheartedly agree. At the same time, someone has to teach people how to use those resources. because you have to want to.
Let me, if I could, please, because we're going to have to, we've been going at it. It was supposed to be an hour. We're going an hour and a half. So I'm going to have to bring it to a close. But a couple of things just from the Hispanic Center's perspective in terms of what we're trying to do our part. Now, again, I've said this, I try to repeat myself, disclosure. I don't have all the answers. I don't have the answers. But the Hispanic Center has a role to play, and we take that seriously. So what have we been doing before what has happened and what's been happening during the pandemic to try to bring funds into the community, raise awareness of the need for more funding to fund social services, to fund supports for trauma. And my Killer Mike has been on, and I've been following things he's been saying, talking about the two things that we can do is, number one, the 2020 census, making sure that every family, every person, every family in Reading is completing their 2020 census, making sure that monies come into our community for those very issues that are true to your heart, Marquise, and to all of us that work in the social service space, okay? The Hispanic Center for the last month and a half has completed 600 census forms for families that we deal with. That translates to $20 million over the next 10 years that the Hispanic Center indirectly is bringing into our community. So I challenge everyone that's following and that's watching us, that's trying to figure out, well, what could I do? What role could I play? It takes 10 minutes to have an impact for 10 years. Please fill out your 2020 census forms. Please, those who are watching and following, ask your members that follow you to fill out their census forms. So that's one way we can indirectly bring in funds to meet those needs that we're all talking about. Number two, again, registering to vote, getting out there to vote, having an impact in voting. If we don't like the people who are representing us, then let's vote them out. And let's bring about people that do have the guiding principles that closer align to what your guiding principles are. But again, it takes a collective. It takes all of us. So those are just two things that the Hispanic Center is doing to try to do our part, okay? And again, this town hall tonight, an opportunity to have different voices come together and to, again, put that out there, to be able to expand our net so that other people are hearing the pain, the struggle, but also the commitment to change that all of us have for wanting to see in our community. So for that, I thank everyone on the call for that. Again, we're only as strong as the team that we have around us that wants to take action. And it is my hope that everyone that's on this call and everyone that's listening, the thousands, and there are thousands of people watching and following and listening. And again, we may all be at a different place. We definitely are all at a different place. I can acknowledge that and accept that, but that's okay. Yeah. That's okay. That's okay. As long as we continue to learn from one another and respect one another, okay? And again, move the needle, that's what needs to be done. It's not gonna happen on this call, but if we continue to work towards it, we hope to see that change down the line. So again, absolutely. Johanny, I know, you and I started this. I want to give you the last word to close this out for all of us. Again, I want to thank everyone personally for being on this call. It means a great deal to me and to our community. And I will be reaching out to you all again. But Johanny, again, if you want to close us out, I would appreciate it.
No problem. Thank you, Mike. I was giving thought to Sunday's Peace March that took place, and there was a member of the Peace March that I was standing in front of the restaurant and we were talking, and he said, just what you said, Mike, like if everyone did their part, if everyone made it, if everyone took it upon themselves to kind of like clean their alleyway, for example, right? Everybody cleans their own alleyway, or their own backyard. We'd have a much cleaner alleyway is what he says. If everybody make sure to take care of their home and their space, then we'd have more cleaner spaces, more welcoming spaces. And my point is this, is that I encourage our Reading Police Department to also look within and their internal systems and figure out what's wrong there and what's within their means to fix there, right? Because then they're going to be able to do more work or better work outside of that internal system that they're subjected to. I want to remind everyone that this is the beginning of action steps that we will be taking. I feel like we should have some type of task force to make sure that we continue this work and that we see it to fruition, and that George Floyd doesn't lose his life. No one should lose their life because of the color of their skin. So there has to be a system that we create also internally within our police department that also provides protection to those people who are blowing those whistles, right? Those people who are holding their team members, their co-workers accountable. So we have a lot of work to do. People, don't give up, keep the faith, stay patient, stay involved, stay committed, and everyone do your part. And we are all at this table. We're all at the same table, but you have to play your part. You cannot stay silent, because silence does not contribute to any solution. Thank you, Mike, for always allowing a space for the dialogue to take place. Thank you to everyone. Thank you, Marquise. You are such a powerful young being and such a great role model. And I encourage you to keep using that voice and keep holding us accountable, including yourself, of course. To our Reading Police Department, thank you for being part of our community and for doing the best you can. But I want better. I want more. I expect better, right? And I know we can do that collectively. Dr. Alec, thank you for last minute jumping on this call. I appreciate your words of wisdom and spiritual uplifting. Crystal, you're a community warrior. Community warrior. We're gonna make some necessary changes. Elta, my sister, I know you're listening, you're tuned in. Like, God brought us together for a reason.
Yes.
Right? This is not coincidence. And our work is lined up. Chief Ternelli, I know you're on the call, you're listening, because I know you have a large role to play because you're at the head of this department, you're in command. But I know we're gonna find a way and we're gonna break the system and create a system that's fair and equal for all. Thank you. I hope everyone has a good night. Mike, I'm passing the mic right back to you.
Everybody, please stay on. I'm going to go ahead and close the stream now, but please stay on.